Jay, I've got a question.
Go ahead.
What was the moment in which, when you were making music and you were finding like the next steps in your career, what was the moment in which you went, I'm starting to understand now what funding means, or like how funding is helpful? What did that hit? Like, when did that land?
Probably around 2 years ago, Anton, my guitarist, he plays in, shout out Anton, he plays in many different bands. And he's telling me how, I think it's his big band Bits and Pieces, like a lot of what they do is like using their recourse to funds, so like Arts Council and things like that, to put on big tours that they do. And he was like, yo, you're hustling backwards, like you're doing all of this movement that you're making, reinvesting money that you make in music, but actually there are funds that exist for you to be able to get to the next stage, so why not tap into that? And so like he was encouraging me for time to apply to like Arts Council for some funding. And I was like, I'm not going to do that. Like, these organizations don't necessarily give opportunities to us. Because like when you see like a lot of the bands who get funding, it's either very London-centric, viewed through that lens, or like if it's up here, traditionally, or what my experience was before I actually engaged with them, was that funding was only reserved for like bands. So I was like, it's not something that's ever really going to serve or help what we're trying to do. So I was like, nah. But anyway, he was like, nah, just go for it. So he was talking to me about developing your creative practice, and there was someone else that was mentioned it to me as well previously. And I just looked up at it, and it was like this fund that exists for creatives to actually figure out what's the next step of their practice. So building on the talks that we've had about like wanting the next project to be made back in Jamaica, I was like, yo, well, I know I want to go home. I know I want to fly with the team out there and make this experience that's documented and it's musical. And I was like, this is the idea. And then I kind of wrote an initial draft, went and spoke to various people that I know who've kind of been through the system before, and they gave me some good pointers on how I can improve what I've written. And then I put it together, sent it to them, and I was just blessed, bro, and got it.
No, that's sick. Because, being like a part of that team and witnessing how it's changed and developed to the point where, again, we were stood in the places that we were stood in Jamaica and doing that sort of stuff, and understanding that, like, as creative as it all is, sometimes there are P's and Q's that you have to be able to explain to someone, you have to be able to articulate to the right people and at the right times, and map that as well to your own journey and growth. So yeah, it was very sick to witness all of that happening. And I didn't even understand the ins and outs and those, like, the technicalities, but you would, again, every now and then you'd drop game on, just be like, yeah, it's how you pitch it, and these are the types of conversations. What is that system like? Because, like, everything in the music industry, everything in most creative industries, there is like an explicit system and then there's an implicit system. What's that system like?
Being like completely 100 about it, I think that the funding system is kind of flawed in the sense of you're asking creatives, even like myself, to sit there and write like what feels like dissertations explaining our ideas and our creativity. And it's like, actually, I think whilst that's a great process, because I imagine having to go through those applications, if it was in any other format, would be incredibly time consuming, whereas that they can literally look at the questions and match it to a pre-discussed criteria or something to eradicate the ones that aren't meeting the standard. But I'm like, there needs to be a different process, because even through trying to pitch Homecoming, when I was writing it, I feel like I didn't articulate the full impact of what I wanted to do as well as I could have in conversation. So I think that there's a bit of a disconnect in terms of the system. Coming back to the question, I feel like the system is great if it works for you, but it's also not so great when it doesn't. Like, I've submitted so many funding applications to various different places, and I was just very lucky to get the Arts Council one at first, and then I've also got some from Factory as well. Shout out Factory. I'm one of the Factory Sounds artists this year. So I think the ecosystem needs more of us to engage with it to make a change. I spoke on this panel for something at Low 4 with the Salford University, and it was just like, I think more people, particularly from like our genres, need to do it, because the funding bid area is incredibly saturated with like bands, orchestras as well. Probably because, think about it. The funding system existed traditionally, in my opinion, to probably put on opportunities for what was classed as high high class art. So like the orchestras, art, things like that. So obviously, it's like you've got different genres and different pockets of society making stuff that speaks to wider amounts of people, and they're having to unpack the notion of what that is and figure out how to make it accessible and how to make it something that everybody can access. And I feel like they've not quite worked that out yet, because even still, like when you see it in Manchester, other than like myself and maybe one or two other people, I don't think there's many like MCs who do what I do who've gone through the funding system.
Okay.
Or engaged with it.
That makes sense in like a genre and a culture that is so outside of some of those like traditionalist systems, and not like because it's different and it's marginalized or whatnot, because it's a heavy majority, it's the most popular music in the world, but the systems aren't catered to it.
It's the interest of the people in the systems. Like on that panel, there was someone from an orchestra who was able to talk about all of the different funding places that exist. Most of the MCs and other artists in Manchester that are within our scene that I interact with, like, don't even know about funding because it's not on their radar, because it's like there's already a pre-acceptance, I guess, of, well, this isn't for me. Like, I make music that's not necessarily for the pockets or the people that I see in that system. I don't know if what I talk about would represent any of their lived experiences. But then it's also like, not me personally, but like the artists I'm talking about. So then it's I guess them seeing that and immediately being like, well, if that's who's deciding where this art goes or what the value of this art is, they're immediately not going to get that.
Then you have to pitch your own value first. Like that's not a starting point.
Like I think I was lucky with Homecoming, because Homecoming was very much about a cultural experience and going home and like this cultural exchange, like on paper, as well as in principle when you see the film. But like on paper, when you see it, even if you don't get the cultural connotations or the magnitude of what we did with the project and what we were trying to do at that stage, on paper it sounds good. You've got like cultural exchange, you've got like trips, you've got like a tangible product at the end of it. Like so that automatically meets their criteria.
Okay.
I'm not an expert in funding, by the way.
That's right. I asked because again, it's one of those mythical things that, like, as a fan first, you hear about these, and sometimes you hear about the positives in which an artist was able to get this specific funding or this connection, or like large artists who are so open in investing in that early funding and early opportunities. Like, so we understand there's an importance of it, but that definition and understanding usually just ends at like funding. Someone gets some money, and it also comes with some opportunities or some sort of structure that will get them from A to B to C to D, or whatever the size is of it, and that's kind of all we see. But there's that implicit knowledge that there's a lot more chess at play going through that process and having those thoughts.
Oh yeah, 100%. Like the fund I got by Arts Council was great, and shout out to them guys if they're watching for giving us the bags
If
to
they're not
create
watching,
the project.
send it to them.
Yeah, but it is a fine game of chess. Like you've got to write this application, you've got to send examples of like your music. Also, when you've got to do a budget, like so a creative project budget. For many people, like the first time I did a funding application, I'm like, I've never done one of these before. Like you can do like your life budget, but like
that's different. To
like
what
asking you the price of shit that you don't know yet. Like how the hell do I know what an engineer in Jamaica is going to charge me?
Yeah.
Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or like your travel expenses. So like if you're working on a principality that you're going to be doing 11 days of studio sessions, what's your traveling expenses going to be? Well, it's like, well, I don't know the route, so I don't know how long the Ubers will be to take us from Pont. So it's like, it becomes like trying to be good at guesstimation in terms of that, and tapping into people. It depends on what project you're applying for, but tapping into the people who know those answers. And I think also just being very honest and showing that you're being honest in the process. Like I was very conservative in what I tried to budget and my budget allocations. And then also once you've done the budget, they then ask you to provide some sort of evidence that you've done what you've done. Yeah. So like when we came back, I provided the spreadsheet thing that Small Guns made with all the receipts, shout out Small Guns, and also a link to the film. Yeah. And they hold on to a final bit of your funding until you've submitted that. Okay. So it's like you have to do it to cover the cost of whatever you've done.
Yeah.
So it is a hard process. Like, I think I only managed to navigate it well because I had the team with me there. I feel like if I had to try and keep on top of like receipts and spreadsheets and then film and then
Yeah.
try and do everything, it'd just be way too much. So my thing, if you're an artist, look at developing your creative practice. I think it's like 5 to 10 grand you can get, and it's literally a fund that exists to develop your creative practice. So I know people who've done projects where it was just stay at home and teach themselves Logic.
Yeah.
There's also people who have, like myself, have used it for albums. There's a whole host of things. It's not prescriptive. So that's good. Just have to have a cool idea about it. You have to write the application yourself, and then you just have to be good with project management. But every Manchester artist that I've worked with, I've put them onto that and been like, yo, try and get onto that, because it just makes sense to get to where we need. Shout out the speaker. I didn't even realize that was on. To get to the next step that we need, like, funds is important, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense, because again, as a fan, you create that oversimplified cycle of someone releases something from their bedroom, it picks up enough that they make enough money to go release something with their local studio and artist. Like, it's so cyclical, but it's overly simplified in that, like, that's how the growth happens. And I guess that's kind of how the whole, like, my community, like, make sure your community loves you first, and like you do all of those local things. All of that feeds into that oversimplification idea. So, like, a question that has come up to me in watching people that we know, shout out Chedu, performing at Glastonbury yesterday.
Shout out Chedu.
Nuts. Like, people to go from the path, and like, again, people like Chedu who've been really honest about what that journey looks like. And aside from the funding and like the budgets and whatnot, what else do those doors give? Like, is it like presence or entry into rooms, which is a whole conspiracy theory. See you guys later to talk about conspiracies. A whole conspiracy theory about, like, what else do those, like, steps open?
I think, like, for me, it was just like avenues for mentorship. So obviously getting the funding allowed us to go to Jamaica, which allowed us to meet Choir. Choir's been like an absolute mentor musically and improved the way that I write and I craft songs. So that was an amazing opportunity. I think that funding also just gets people to take you a bit more seriously. Like, as a result of, obviously, the Homecoming project, ended up signing a publishing deal with Recording Music Publishing.
Yep.
Shout out Kesia. So it's like, it gives you the avenues to meet those people. Like, if I didn't go to Jamaica, make that project, I wouldn't have met Choir. Choir wouldn't have put me on the radar of Kesia, who then wouldn't have taken an interest in the music, and then, or may have at a later stage, but not at this point.
Yeah.
To then obviously deal with my publishing affairs. I feel like funding gives you that momentum to propel yourselves. I think it's really hard. Like, and there's a lot of, this is why we set up this podcast, because there's like a lot of, not lying, but like oversimplification, like you're saying. Like, everyone believes that, just post consistently and just keep doing this and you'll have this momentum, but momentum only exists if there's a clear direction of where you're going.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're going to run into walls. And it's like, if you're so down into the art and doing what we do as artists, you're not looking at where you're going, you're looking at maintaining the momentum that social media is telling that you need to do.
Yeah.
And you can see, like, the points where I've had to do that in my career, and I've just had these projects or bursts of singles that haven't really been kind of connected to anything. Last year, where I put out, I think it was a single a month or something, or close to that, up until we went to Jamaica. Like, most of those singles are good, solid individual songs, but there's no tangible thread between them. So it's like, well, what's the point? Like, we know that we love music, and particularly in hip hop and reggae, it's about that journey that you hear and the storytelling within the music. So I'm like, for me personally, I think, like, trying to keep up in that momentum cycle didn't work for me as a writer. So yeah, I think, I can't remember what the question was. I just went off on a tangent there.
No, that's enough. That's it. No, that's a good explanation on something else that I was thinking, is how much do these sometimes really, like, uniform and, like, project management style things, how much do they influence, whether it's, like, positively or not so positively, that creative process? Because you said sometimes you can't decide in the most natural way, human way possible, especially with the types of stories that like we tell in the culture. How do you go, okay, this is the type of story that I'm going to unpack in, and then the project says 6 weeks, you have this checkpoint, or like, do you have to think about your creation in that more structured way, or do you just go, you create a project plan, and then the creation catches up?
So that's a really interesting question. So I knew, like, obviously, I knew I wanted to do homecoming, and I knew what it was going to be, and I knew what my subject matter was going to be. But I didn't do any pre-writing before Jamaica. Like, as you saw, like in some spaces, there was just freestyles that became songs. But in order to get to that space, I knew that my pen game had to be sharp.
Yep.
So once I got the money, I just started treating it like I watched this interview by J. Cole where he talks about the importance of drills, and that's what I was doing.
Yep.
I was like getting up every day, being like, yo, there's running those 7-minute drills, 7 minutes on this subject, 7 minutes on that subject. Just literally thinking about the way I approach things and putting myself in as many different scenarios. Because before Jamaica, I was someone that used to struggle to write in studio sessions. I'd have to take away like a beat, live with it, and then I could be like, I don't know, like on the train or walking to Asda and the lyric will come to me and I'll just write it.
Yeah.
But then I thought about it in a deeper way and I was like, yo, like in Jamaica, I'm not going to be able to control that. Like I can't be in a studio session and be like, all right, let me take this away and go, because we don't have that luxury of time.
10 a.m. means by 11 a.m. that microphone is on.
Yeah, and like we were there for like 11 days or something and made a 14-track album in 11 days. So it's like, I don't have that luxury of time. It's like, we just have to get it done. And so I was like, the only thing I can do beyond having the conceptual foundation in my mind is just be prepared so that when, like you say, I walk in a room and someone plays a beat, I'm sharp enough to be able to articulate what I want within that time frame.
Yeah, that makes sense. And again, to witness that, there were some moments of what felt like absolute magic because it's the drills and that practice coming to fruition. It was rewarding to see other people also witness how quick the team could like set up and get into that creative energy, because again, working and seeing how some people take time to like warm up and speed up to get to that point where, because of that work you put in, we'd walk into a place and be like, start playing it while we're setting up. I'm running around setting cameras up and you're just like, okay, finding what the tempo is, getting into the mind frame, and by the time we're set up, you're already finding harmonies and finding flows and patterns in the songs, and they're just like, where is that coming from? So yeah, it was very rewarding and like magical to see that at points. And again, that was layered with like the inspiration that took some of that to places that I don't think any of us could have planned for.
I think like it's that. I think that's the greatest thing that funding gave me. It's the opportunity to be in another place and experience that creation. But then also, I think what was also a big help was the Amsterdam trip that we did before it.
Yep.
You were a genius with that because that was like training day. I was like, okay, we're gonna go to another country. We're gonna have this space, record music, and do what we need to do. And we did. We made some good music, but we weren't as in the thing that we should have. And it was great because it meant that we were able to learn and refine, so that when we hit Jamaica, we knew exactly what we were running. It was a smart gameplay. I didn't overvisit until just now.
Just thinking, just like training camp. What did I call that weekend? I gave it a name as well.
You did
but
give
I can't
it a
remember
name.
what the name was. But it had like going there and just that plan of we will even just micro compress, so not even like a full day. So we'll start a morning with that routine. I guess those drills are what set us up. So in Jamaica, it'll be like wake up, breakfast, get ready, pack the equipment that you need, and we like everyone had each other's sixes with stuff like that. And again, that came from the drills of being somewhere like Amsterdam where it wasn't the pressure, the external pressure wasn't there. I guess that's what made it helpful and like productive, even though it was like it wasn't about the content that was coming out, it was about the process and nailing that process to be able to get there, and ideally like wherever as well, because it's like, okay, the mic's going to be set up here, the camera, find a place to stand the camera. What we have to deal with buses going on outside, that's fine. This is our aim is to get to that point. So it in reflection, that makes a lot of sense.
Shout out Chef Larry for giving everyone COVID that trip as
Apart
well.
from me, I'm immune to the dunya.
So, for context, everyone who went on that trip got COVID from Chef Larry, who came being ill. We pulled up at the airport. I'm going to put your business in the street, Chef Larry.
Ooh.
came to the airport sweating his absolute back out.
Yeah.
It was so funny.
COVID had him on the ropes.
Yeah. We didn't know.
He was losing in the 8th round.
He didn't know it was COVID, innit? And then, like, as we got to Amsterdam, he was sicker and sicker. And like everyone got sick, apart from Cyan. I don't know how you did it.
Prayers.
You're like making like pineapple teas.
Yeah.
And
Say your prayers. Drink your vitamins. Say your prayers. Stay humble.
I was like, because after, like, when we knew he was sick, because I'm a germaphobe, I stayed at the opposite side of the room to him most times. And I was like, how, like, you were close. And I was like, how did you do it, man?
Yeah.
Nuts. Yeah, but shout out Chef Larry, gave everyone COVID at
Again,
Amsterdam,
it's
innit?
part of the test. Sometimes people get sick.
Yeah, spiritual warfare.
One of the last questions I had about that was like already sat in my head was, how do you then adapt, like those moments where like it was completely unplanned and things like moments, opportunities arose and all of that. How do you adapt all of that and then look back at like something that was a fairly documented project plan, knowing that like these people who probably don't understand the context or may not see the depth and breadth of something that you're doing, that you've already presented to them. So they've gone yes at this point, and then you've gone away, and then the experience that you've been prepping for has opened all of these other doors. How do you then take all of that and then go back to those same people?
So you get given like a report that you have to write. It's kind of like school.
Yeah, this is feeling like hella school.
I think it's like 1,500 words or something.
Ooh.
Like, this is what I learned. And it's like a report, but I think I did like 100 words and then I just sent them a link to the rough edit of the film. I put all the receipts and everything on it. And I think whoever was looking must have just seen it, scrubbed through the video, saw that we were in like Tough Gong and all these other places, and we're like, he's done everything and more he said he's going to do. That's fine. I remember I submitted it and like maybe 2 days later I got the final payment.
Oh, Jesus.
So I was like,
Someone was quick with it.
They were just like, yeah, he's clearly done what he said he was going to do. Because if you get that proposal, you're probably like, how the hell is this kid from Manchester going to go to this other country and get involved with all of this different stuff? And so the fact that there's like visual evidence, I think we're just like,
Yeah, that's true, actually. I guess that's part of, again, a good way that you were able to intertwine all of the different mediums and not just make it like a receipts and checks and balances thing. It wasn't just you go in, make sure that we have the receipt from this thing, or make sure someone signs the invoice at this place. Like, it was so part of the entire experience that we were capturing the documentary and we were exploring these things. If someone goes, oh yeah, go up to this bar or there's this thing happening in that place, we were like, would have a calculated quick conversation and be like, okay, that sounds like the right place to be. Small Guns would be like, I know that on a Thursday night, this is the place where we should be, because even just being there would be a good opportunity. And just like following all of that was so part of the entire experience that, yeah, I guess scrubbing through that video, and they may stop at points where we're in street parties and someone's lighting up torch, and then the next scene is we're on a little remote island on a beach doing interview sit down. So, yeah, I guess in hindsight, yeah, it means that for them, they go, oh, holy snap, this is more than just this. And the core of all of that is the album, which is yet to be released and shared to everyone. It's like they can see all of that. So yeah, I guess that's a good way of doing like a whole immersive experience thing.
I think that's what's tripped me out about the whole process. Like, all that people have had is a title and 2 songs.
Yeah.
Fields and Mandela, which are out now. Go stream them. Fields and Mandela are out now on all platforms.
All DSPs, tell your mum and them.
Yeah, share them. But yeah, so like and it's mad seeing like people who follow me and their understanding of it. Like, there's someone who does a podcast in Manchester called Nina, who went back to Jamaica, who like really liked the last single, and then when she was in Jamaica, like shared pictures of her in Jamaica, and it was like you could tell she was having that homecoming experience.
Yeah.
And like Mandela hits deeper now that
Yeah.
she's been there. Or like there was someone else in Australia who was telling us about, who's like someone who got onto the music through Fire Royal, was telling me about what Mandela means to them. And it's like, I think that's really nice to see, is like how homecoming is this experience that everyone can relate to. I also think that what's dope about, I guess, like doing the project in this way, coming back to what you were saying, is that I think as creatives, sometimes we trip over the idea of content. I know I do. I overthink it massively.
Yep.
And it's like we spend all of our time making this dope music or this dope art through our own process, and then neglect documenting the process. And then after we've completed the project, we go back trying to manufacture the process as content.
Yeah.
And it's like, why not just document the whole thing? Like, there are so many bits. Like, one of the most viewed videos that we had while we were away was that one where we were, I don't even know where we were. We were like just by the river where we did that Dry Is Not a Way of Life.
Yeah.
That was just literally going to the toilet, and you notice Carmex on the wall, and we were like, you're like, yo, just pan the camera to me. You said it, and I posted it same time.
Yeah.
Like, and it created lots of interesting comments and stuff just about Carmex and the fact it was in Jamaica. Like, I feel like, yeah.
In hindsight, you can't manufacture stuff.
You can't manufacture, and that's been the biggest lesson from this. It's like, I will never make a project again where I try and retrospectively generate content. Like, I want to document the process, pull from the process to highlight the themes that emerge, and then manufacture that as content. And I don't just mean like the performances, but like the reasonings. Like, one of my favorite scenes in the film is like the clips from the lunchtime we had, where it was like me, you, Believer, Kongs, Carmelo, and Dante.
Yeah.
And we were just talking about like, the Portuguese and like the story, the history of their occupation in certain places of Africa, and like how like there was a whole journey of conversation that happened whilst we were just eating
that was
food.
just a lunch break.
And it was just like those moments, because it was like when I was watching them with new eyes, I was like, yo, how did we even get here? We're just eating lunch and we're getting this history lesson, and then as soon as we come out of the history lesson, it's back to humor.
Yeah.
And it's just like humor and wisdom, and the intersection of that being how we learn. Like, I don't know, there was something really cool about it. But yeah, that's how I found the beauty in the content. It was going back and looking at how content is in the form of these gems of life that we don't process because we're being present within them, taking them and then sharing them with the world.
Yeah, I think as like in those moments, I remember running around with a camera and like around lunch,
so funny, bro.
just like eating food and being involved in the conversations because it was so educational, and like learning from people who you've lived completely different paths as is one of the greatest things to do as a human being. So being able to just like sit there and be fully immersed, but then also, like you've said, in hindsight, is even if we were being so like binary about creating content, in retrospect, we would have started in our heads from the moment that conversation ended and we walked back into the studio, because so much was on work and on still like the creativity, that we were able to bounce and have those deep conversations, sometimes conspiracies, be able to laugh, be able to like really reflect on cultures everywhere. I'll never forget like talking about being a black man in different parts of the world and moving. So like they were telling us about how like going from Jamaica to America and like that dynamic, and like how like historically those connections have been with Miami, and then us talking about like moving around the UK, which is an own thing, and like my experience of Zambia to the UK, like all of those completely different dynamics, just again while we're having lunch. In hindsight, all of that would be missed if you're just like, the content that people may want to see is me sat in the studio spitting the first 16 bars of the verse that came an hour later.
Bro, that's the thing that I've learned. Like, even for doing this podcast, like some of the greatest compliments we've had about the podcast have been like people who listen to my music and as fans messaging us being like, yo, it's actually nice to just see you being you. Yeah. Like, not trying to sell like a gig, or not trying to sell like my latest single, or you like pushing something that we're doing. It's just actually, this is how we are in
This
life,
is it,
innit?
yeah.
Like,
This is how we are, and the creativity comes
Let me
from
just
it.
throw a question. A question to both of you.
we need no labby cam. I'm going to keep campaigning for this.
Knowing that the project was already funded or partly funded, did that take weight off your shoulder and let you be extra creative and not necessarily have to worry about the money side of things?
Yes and no, because initially we didn't know the project was funded, so story, without giving the film too much about the film away.
Go on, tell the story.
Around like this time last year, me, Sign, and the team sat down and were like, homecoming, we're going to do this project in Jamaica. By hell or high water, we have to get to Jamaica and we're going to do it. So because I already had this so I guess it was just like, I already had this preconceived notion that funding would not happen for me because no one that looks or sounds like me in terms of the music I make has had success with the funding bodies up here. So I was like, I'm not going to put all my eggs in that basket. So fortunately at that time, I had recourse to money where I was able to put some of that into the project. So I was like, you know what, if this doesn't happen, I'm just going to scale back what we do, but I'm still going to make this happen, you know, even if I have to, I don't know, like work 2 jobs or whatever, I will make this happen. So we already planned what we were going to do. We had like a Notion page set up. We were putting up together lists. It was worked like a job. Like everyone was doing different things and we were on it, like planning constantly, having meetings like almost bi-weekly to just kind of make sure the momentum was happening. And then we got to December and I was playing a show at the Berry Met. I'll never forget it. And it was like really undersold. Like I've never had painful shows. Like I've been blessed enough, touch wood, that every show I've ever done, bar this one, has been close to selling out or sold out. Like, you know, go check out the footage from the Manchester homecoming show last year and you can see.
Phenomenal.
But like, I feel that show was just like, the promoter put us on in the Berry Met and we're really grateful for it. But I guess like it was a weird thing to do because my fan base wasn't going to travel to Berry and I was very vocal about that. But they're like, no, we still want to do it and it's part of this community engagement. So we did it. And bro, like sound check, we could see that there was not many people. Like, I think it was like just my friends, really, you guys who came and stuff.
Community, just like
the core people who were here for me came. So maybe less than 10 people in the room. And I remember being like, you know what, whatever it is, we'll just go and enjoy it. I think you were saying actually just treat it like a paid rehearsal. You've got your band up here, do your thing, get content, just have fun with it. And we're in this pub and it was me, Sign, Isaiah, who came up to be the support, Faye, the band, and Simeon, and who else was there? There was Rowan James, who was the other support. And we were just chatting and chopping it up and kind of laughing, and while at the same time drying out my sorrows about the potentially performing to a pretty empty room. And I just got this notification, and it was like, "Yo, there's been a note. Your application has been successful, and there is a note. Your application has been successful. Please see the notes on your funding application to find out your amount, because they like to tease you. They don't tell you how much you've got." And then I went on it in the pub, and luckily Anton, who's a G, started filming on his phone the reaction, bro. And I got my full amount, and I was just like, yo, like
in the moment, I just remember being stood there at that table as that happened.
Yeah. So it was only at that moment I knew that, oh shit, yeah, now I don't have to like potentially inject my own money or like try and find out another way of making this work. And I know I've got this foundation now, so anything else that I invest in this project is to enhance that. And it was just like, all right, cool, I've got gas in the tank now. Yep. I can do this show, which was kind of like a purge and like was great to just get everything out. So in the new year, I can hit the ground running, knowing I'm going back home, that I can create this album and that I'm going to be able to work with everyone. And like, there were so many synchronicities. I remember a few days before that show, messaging Boxy, shout out Boxy, who's a Grammy-winning engineer and producer. He followed me, which I assumed was like Small Guns doing some networking behind the scenes. So I just messaged him and was just like, yo, I hope one day we can work together. Thank you for the follow, bro. I'm a fan of your work, because I know he's produced for like Jesse Royal and some of my other favourite artists like that. Bro, he was like, yeah, one day, hopefully. Who was my first session with in Jamaica, bro?
First session, we walked in and he was on work as well.
We didn't know, so we booked Tough Gong. Small Guns must have knew. we booked Tough Gong in it. What in the engineer's boxy? And I'm like, right, like we were messaging in December. And so it's just
Ready,
like, I think there's something special. Like you hear like a lot of these like creatives talking about, I say creatives like I'm not one, like lots of like spiritual creatives talking about like the power of like manifestation and speaking things into existence. And like before I used to be like, oh, that just sounds like you've said something and then it's worked out and you're saying that to be encouraging. But nah, like everything about this album proves that that's real to me. Like we spoke everything into existence. We spoke about going to Jamaica and working with Grammy-winning producers to actually being in Jamaica and doing it.
Yeah, multiple situations. And I think for me it wasn't just like passive, just saying something while you're waiting for your dinner. It was the ability to just go and write it down and like humble yourself and articulate yourself in it. We sat there and we were going, the aim is to do this, and we're not trying to theorize or operationalize every micro step to get there. We were just like, the end goal is to have something that encapsulate this world that we were talking about and building. And then when we got to that point, it was like everything was being said and done with such intention that we'd end up in a scenario and be like, I've mentally prepared to be in the scenario, to be conscious about the scenario, to be thankful of the scenario, and then to continue to like immerse myself in the scenario. I remember that day when we were sat at that lunch and I had my sunglasses and I was like fighting with the cameras back and forth and my sunglasses broke in my pocket. Glasses that I've had for like 10 years. And I was just so in the zone of like what we were doing and immersed. I was like, I can't see, like my vision, I need my glasses and all of that to be able to film in all of that sunlight. And I was like, my vision's gone now, so I'm shooting mostly blind here. But whatever is happening has got me so in tune. At home me will deal with all of this stuff. And at home me was like, I had to come home, go Specsavers, do all of that nonsense again. But in that moment, I was like, this is the step forward that we've already been prepping for, so I don't even need to be here. I don't even need to like overthink or any of that. Like it was so intentional.
I mean, what you both just said there, it's quite telling as well, because you said that you spoke into existence, but there's a power in moving with purpose. Yeah. Right? You spoke into existence, but at the same time, you're writing it down. And once you write something down, you've actually birthed it. Yeah. Do you get what I mean? And it's not just about speaking it, also just moving with purpose and writing things down. Again, putting it into motion.
I think that's what really helped as well. Like, just telling people what we're doing. It's like, yo, my next project's going to be Homecoming and I'm thinking about doing this. And like, people would like be like, yeah, that sounds dope. I hope you can do it. It's like, no, we will. And it's just like, you know, by hell or high water, it will happen. It was such a mad journey. Like, and what was really cool as well is just seeing how much people opened up. Like Kong's Dramatic is someone that I worked with on Overstand. One of my singles I did a few years ago, and we've never met. But when we were in Jamaica, he just opened a studio for us, and we were there. Like since he plays for Protégé in it. When he came to Manchester, linked up with him, came to my yard, we chilled, went back to the hotel, linked Proto and some of the other people there in the touring party. Like he doesn't need to do that and introduce me and try and put me in the rooms with people, but he does because of the, I guess like the creative synergy that we have. So I think like the whole speaking things into existence in that sense really helps, because then people are also able to see like, this guy from Manchester who's not that big has managed to somehow get hit. Yeah. Like even if I don't believe in, even if I don't get his wave or whatever, I have to believe in it because I can see he's determined. It's mad. PSA, I'm wearing shades to, you know, deal, so I'm not blinking all the time on camera. I'm saying this because I don't want to come across as one of those podcast douchebags. You know, like with shades on, just trying to be cool.
I wasn't even going to say anything. I was just taking it away, isn't it?
No, that's need to, man. My eyes are sensitive to light, innit? I don't want to be squinting up the thing.
This is your profession. You are going to be in front of lights.
Yeah, and I'll just wear shades. This is the new me, innit? This is Homecoming, Jay. Shades everywhere. If you see me in shades in daylight, or nighttime, sorry, mind your business, innit?
Yeah, mind your business.